Hello, everybody, and thank you for virtually tuning in to my talk. My name is Matt Schmidt. First off, I'd like to thank CarolinaCon for putting this all together virtually. I'm sure it was not easy. Um, and I can't wait till we get back in person and can all nerd out again together. But until then, I'm just happy that I have a platform where I can share something that I found very interesting, and I think others will as well. This is actually a talk that I submitted last year, which was approved, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, was canceled. Fortunately, however, this talk has greatly improved since then, so this is a much better version of what would have been presented last year. But anyway, I do have some bad news for some people. Your IPv6 is showing. So before we jump into the content, do a little who am I on that previous slide there. My official title is security engineer, but I'm essentially just a penetration tester at Triaxiom Security, which is a company here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a meetup founder and organizer of Queen City Skitties, which is a once a month group where we like to meet up and kind of talk about offensive security related topics. However, since we're all nerds, we like to just talk tech in general. So we've had some pretty cool talks like home automation, hacking hospitals, defending hospitals against adversaries. We just have a lot of people come from all different backgrounds, like hobbyists, students, professionals, entrepreneurs. So definitely encourage anyone to come on out to that. I am a military veteran. I was in the United States Marine Corps for 4 years as a mortarman. I am a future Cybertruck owner, and I throw this in there because I used to think it was super ugly, and now it's grown on me. And I like to talk to anyone who is considering getting one or has a reservation for one. I am a bourbon enthusiast. I have a little collection going on here that you can see. And then on to the boring stuff. I have a bachelor's in information technology, my OSCP, EWPT, and SEC Plus. So let's talk about what we're going to see here in a little bit. We're going to do a quick IPv6 overview, a story time, which kind of prompted this entire talk to exist. And then we'll do some considerations for an external pen test for both the attack and defense side of things, as well as for an internal penetration test when dealing with IPv6. And then we'll wrap everything up with a conclusion at the end. So, very brief IPv6 overview. The IP address space is managed globally by the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or the IANA, and there are 5 regional internet registries, which you can see here on the map. One of these being the RIPE NCC, which is officially run out of IPv4 addresses in November of 2019. Now, there should be a little asterisk there because while they have officially run out, each RIR can still allocate recovered IP addresses and addresses reserved for a special purpose. And additionally, individual internet service providers still have pools of unassigned IPs, and they have the ability to recycle old IP addresses that are no longer used by subscribers. So while they have run out, they can still allocate IPs. But this does present as a concern, and which is why IPv6 was created to begin with. So let's do a little breakdown of IPv6 versus IPv4. IPv6 uses 128 bits, formatted in hexadecimal, grouped in fours, giving 8 groups or blocks, and it can be shortened. And so you can see here, while it can be shortened, still very confusing and long. But because of that, it allows for a ton of IPv6 addresses to be available. And I encourage anyone to go on Google and just look up the sheer number of IPv6 addresses that are possible. It's a lot, and we're not going to run out. Now, IPv4 uses 32 bits, formatted in dotted decimal, and will likely eventually run out. So that is why we have IPv6. I think people would be very surprised to know that organizations are starting to roll out IPv6. So it is something that you should not be afraid of. You should be comfortable with seeing one, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. So let's do a little story time. It was 2019, just got hired as a pen tester. I'm feeling really cool at the time. Just got done with my OSCP and some other courses, so I feel like I can take on the world. I just got assigned an external penetration test, and I'm ready to rock and roll there. Reviewing the scope provided by the client, and I see this. And that's basically my face at that point. Never seen IPv6 addresses used in the wild. didn't know what to do with that, don't know how to test against one. The courses that I took didn't really talk about how to do that from an external penetration test standpoint. So I'm dumbfounded. So this leads me into our next kind of topic here: research. Um, if you want to be a penetration tester, let alone just a professional in the infosec world, continuous learning and research is vital. You need to always be learning new topics, tools, techniques. Plus, it's a lot of fun to learn new ways to hack people. But a good penetration tester should always understand what they're doing before they do it. So, what that kind of can look like, one way I learn really well is by someone explaining things to me and breaking it down and doing whiteboarding, where we get up, walk over to a whiteboard and literally draw everything out, talk about it step by step. Great way to understand every step of the way, why things work and how they work. Always ask someone with experience for an explanation on something. In my case, for these IPv6 addresses, I asked some of my more experienced coworkers, and nobody has ever seen them. Everyone said, I have no idea. Good luck. So this led me to creating a lab environment. AWS is awesome for quick lab building and breakdown. I was able to create a whole little IPv6 network, some victim machines and an attacking machine, and it was perfect for that. So let's talk about what works, how things work, and then we'll talk about what doesn't work. So some tools work with IPv6 and some do not. Additionally, you are going to have your equipment configured for IPv6 so that you can even communicate with other IPv6 addresses. So that might look like configuring your router and switches and other networking gear. And if you don't want to go through all that, or you kind of can't do all that, then like I used, consider doing AWS, where you can create IPv6 public addresses super easy, and figure out how that all works. Um, so tools that do work out of the box, Nmap and WordPress scan work great. Nmap, you can simply do the -6, provided that IP address. With WP scan, it's a little different. You're gonna have to provide that URL flag, and then you need to put your IPv6 around in brackets when you do that. So let's see what that looks like. So WP scan, again, got that URL flag that you're going to provide to it, and then you're going to provide the IPv6 in those brackets. It looks a little weird, but it works. You can go ahead and scan some WordPress sites just fine doing that. Nmap, very easy. Just provide it that -6 flag and all the other flags that you would normally do on your Nmap scan, and you do not need to put it around brackets. It knows it knows what an IPv6 address looks like and how to make that work. So let's talk about what doesn't work. So options for tools that don't natively support IPv6. One great way is find somebody who already did it. There's a lot of people who are starting to stumble across IPv6 addresses, and because of that, they are finding the same thing. Some tools don't work, and they're creating their own version. So go on GitHub or go on Google or GitHub and search, for example, a Noom for Linux IPv6. Somebody made an IPv6 ready version of that, which is linked right there. If it does not exist, consider making your own IPv6 enabled tool. If you have the time, knowledge, and resources, go ahead and make a tool, share it on GitHub, and help everybody out. And even if you don't have the knowledge for it, consider making it anyway, because you're going to learn how to make it from that. So great learning experience. You can use a tool like SOCAT to forward and receive IPv6 requests through your localhost. And this is going to look really confusing, but I'm going to go on to the next slide and kind of explain that. So essentially what we're doing here is we're using SOCAT, which establishes two bidirectional byte streams and transfers data between them. So what we're essentially doing is we can scan an IPv6 address by scanning ourselves. So looking at this over here, we can see we're setting up a TCP4 listen on port 80, which is us, and we are going to transfer any traffic between that IPv6 address through ourselves. So then you can go ahead and run Nikto, and you're literally just scanning yourself on port 80. It works. It's weird. Not all tools will work with it. I believe, Durbuster wasn't working too well with that, but some tools will work, and if you need to use that, you can. Um, Keep in mind, you were going to see a lot of traffic spitting out through that SOCAT command, and that's just a big eye opener of how loud and noisy your tools are. Another tool is Hydra. Hydra supports IPv6 out of the box, which kind of surprised me with the -6 flag. You can see an example here of me password spraying an RDP login against the demo admin account, and their password was password123. Not uncommon to see weak passwords in the wild, and then I went ahead and logged into that server. So let's talk why this all matters. Attack surface might be wildly different between IPv4 and IPv6 addresses on the same exact host. Very important as a penetration tester to cover all your bases because you do not want to fail your client. You want to give them full coverage because if you miss it, someone else might catch it and then they can get hacked or compromised potentially. So we do not want that. We want full coverage. So looking at this AMAS enumeration here, we are going to output the IP on the domain hacker1.com. You can see here they have IPv4 and IPv6 addresses on the same exact host. And then let's look at this Nmap scan below. So what we're looking at here is a IPv6 version on the top, IPv4 version on the bottom. This IPv6 scan is showing ports 80, 445, 3389, and 5985 open. Very bad. And the scan below that is only showing port 80. So this is very similar to what I saw on my assessment. I scanned a host, and all I saw was, I believe, 80 and 443. I scanned it again, and I saw a whole lot of more ports and services, including 445 being SMB and 3389 being RDP. These should never be exposed to the internet. So very bad. This client was not aware that they had all these extra ports and services exposed to the internet on their IPv6 host, or IP address rather. So let's talk some key takeaways. So not all tools support IPv6 addresses. You might need to find a workaround or make a tool that works with IPv6. These addresses are formatted in such a way that you'll often need to put them in brackets. Here's an example of what that would look like if you were accessing it in a web browser. And IPv6 may be revealing more ports than intended and necessary versus its IPv4 address on the same exact host. So like this iceberg, you want to keep all those ports and services below the surface, behind that firewall, and really limit your exposure. You do not need to be exposing SMB and RDP open. Really important to check your firewall rules, as I just mentioned. What are you allowing in and out on IPv6 that you're not allowing in and out on IPv4? You want to eliminate that low-hanging fruit and make it harder for an attacker. If you are using AWS, it is super easy. I think I learned AWS security rules in probably 5 minutes. It is incredibly easy to just set all of that up and block things that should not be getting in and out. Okay, so let's move forward on the internal pen side of things. What is an internal penetration test, though? We're essentially looking at what an attacker can do from inside of your network. What can an attacker do if they simply connect a laptop or a Dropbox with no privileges? What kind of information can they exfiltrate? Essentially, what can a hacker do inside of your corporate network? So IPv6, let me back up and explain what Windows did with IPv6. It makes sense, however, Windows machines since Windows Vista have IPv6 enabled by default, and it is favored by default. Windows saw an opportunity that IPv6 would be rolling out eventually, and they wanted to get ahead of the game so that all of their devices would be ready for that big switch. However, because of that, a lot of people are not aware that IPv6 is actually enabled and favored by default on their machines, which leaves a big security gap. So Responder, which does LLM&R and NBNS spoofing, is more and more starting to get increasingly remediated by companies because they're doing penetration tests year in and year out, and they are learning that this is a very easy win for attackers. So they're starting to button up their security and remediate that. So while Responder might not work anymore for you, Man in the Middle 6 is to the rescue and will likely work. So before we talk about what it can do, let's talk about how does it work. Man in the Middle 6 will advertise IPv6 is available across the network or domain. It will respond to DHCP version 6 requests and assign victims an IPv6 address. From there, it will make the attacking machine the DNS server. And again, uh, IPv6 is favored on all Windows machines, so it's going to favor that IPv6 DNS server, which is the attacker, and then it will serve a fake WPAD file which requires authentication. From there, using NTLM relay, we can relay those credentials. So, what can we do with all of that? Paired with InPacket's NTLM relay, it is a dangerous force. Attackers, again, can advertise IPv6 is available and reply to those requests and DNS queries. It can then relay NTLM v2 hashes to a victim machine, capture those hashes, dump Active Directory information in great detail, impersonate users, add users and elevate them to enterprise admin, and more. Essentially, what you have here as an attacker is that infinity gauntlet. It is a powerful force. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to do a quick demo, but before we do, I just wanted to put these slides up so that if anyone needed to, they could go ahead and pause this and look at it. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to run Man in the Middle 6 alongside NTLM Relay, and this is what we can reasonably expect to see. So let me go ahead and pause and I'll get that demo environment set up and we'll see what this looks like in real time. Okay, so let's walk through the basic command usage of Man in the Middle 6 used along with NTLM Relay. And then in a little bit, we'll talk about some kind of information that an attacker can find useful, as well as some follow-on attacks that will break out in another demo right after this. So first off, we're going to use Python 3 with Man in the Middle 6. We're going to use the -d flag specifying the victim domain. And in this case, we're using Westeros.local. So I'll go ahead and hit enter and run that. And then with NTLM Relay, we're going to use the -6 flag for IPv6. We're going to use the -t flag for target, and we're going to be authenticating against LDAPs on our domain controller. And then TAC-WH is going to be the fake WPAD file that we'll be serving. The -L will be our where we want our loot to go, where we're going to be dumping that Active Directory information. And then finally, the -OF is where we want to output those captured NTLM v2 hashes. So I'll go ahead and run this, and then we will switch over to our Windows machines. And as you can see here, there's our domain controller with our users, and then we've got a Windows machine here. And I'm going to go ahead and speed up the process by restarting this machine. So as I restart this, we're going to start to see some more traffic, and I'm going to go ahead and pause. And once we start getting that traffic coming through, I will switch back over to Kali and show you what we'll be seeing once we start relaying credentials. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit of traffic here. I'm going to go ahead and log back into that Windows machine, which is just out of view. Okay, and we're starting to get a little traffic in here. Went ahead and logged in. And we'll let this go just a little bit longer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this here, shut these commands down, and we'll go ahead and just kind of dissect what came through here. So we can see that we authenticated against LDAPs on the domain controller with the user Paul K. And then if we go down here, we'll see it attempted to create a user, and it actually ended up making two. Ideally, we would want one. We don't need two, but we got two users here with unique and random strings along with passwords. And then additionally, there's a little blurb down here that says, try using DC sync with secretsdump.py and this user. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit here, but first let's kind of talk about what we just saw. So NTLM Relay with man-in-the-middle 6 relayed credentials to the domain controller and was able to dump out some information for us in this loop folder. So let's look at some of this information real quick. Go ahead and look at the domain users. We're able to see these domain users and the accounts that it created. We can look at domain users by group. And additionally, we can look at the domain groups. So let's look back on the domain users by group. We can see this Paul Cake account that we authenticated against. They're a member of the IT user group, which happens to be domain admins. And interestingly enough, if you look in the description, you'll see the password for the JSnow account, Ghost123. It is possible, and it has happened in penetration tests in the past, where people and companies will set the password in the description field. So this can be very, very helpful to an attacker to look and review at those description fields. And additionally, there's a little Easter egg here. Reset all user passwords to Westeros 1 when necessary, a direction to the IT group. Another common trend with some organizations, they'll reset user passwords when necessary to company name with 2021 or just one after it or just a company name, really giving a lot of users weak passwords who have no intention of changing them because it's easy to remember. So again, looking at these descriptions can be very helpful to an attacker. So looking at some other loot that we've got here, let's open up those captured NTLM v2 hashes, and we can see that we captured a few hashes here, which we can go ahead and then take offline and crack and attempt to get those in their clear text versions. All right, we're back. So let's unpack what we just saw. We used man-in-the-middle 6 in conjunction with NTLM Relay. We authenticated against the LDAPs on the domain controller. We created a new user. We dumped the Active Directory information and saw some pretty cool loot. We captured some NTLM v2 hashes, which we can go ahead and try to take offline and crack. And then we saw a password leak in the description field from one of the loot files. So let's take it a step further. Now what we're going to do is we already created a user account. We're going to take that user account that's been created and try to escalate their privileges to an enterprise admin. And then from there, we are going to go ahead and confirm that and try to dump the ntds.dit file. The ntds.dit file is a file that contains all the account password hashes on the domain, which you can then try to take offline and crack. So let's go ahead, I'll jump back over and we'll see what this looks like in real time. So going back to things, we're going to run man-in-the-middle 6 again against the Westeros.local domain. We have NTLM Relay, and only thing we're kind of changing here is getting rid of that loot directory flag as well as the output file flag. We're good with the hashes that we got. We can go ahead and crack those. Paul K is a domain admin, so if we can crack his hash and get that clear text password, we're pretty much good. But let's go ahead and try to escalate the user privileges of this one account that we created. So before we do that, I'm going to switch back over to the domain controller view, and we're going to go ahead and look at this user. So this is a user. We're going to try to elevate their privileges. You can see there's a regular domain user. So switching back to Kali, we're going to run that. And very similarly, I'm going to restart this Windows machine just to kind of get things moving a little bit faster here. And I'm going to pause and start it back up once we get that traffic. Okay, so we're going to log back in with that user account on the Windows machine that is just out of view. And we are getting that success message. We're getting a little bit more traffic. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And let's dissect this one again. Okay, so we were able to authenticate against LDAPs on the domain controller with user Paul K yet again. We were able to successfully add this user to enterprise admins. So let's double check just to make sure that actually worked. Going to the domain controller, we're going to refresh our user list. Open this up. and he is a member of Enterprise Admins. So that did work. We were able to successfully use NTLM Relay with Man in the Middle 6 to elevate a user that we created through the same tool to an enterprise admin. Enterprise admin is an admin of all domains, which is higher than domain admin. So it's a pretty big deal. A very powerful tool again. So now we're going to switch back over to Kali. And another example of an attack I wanted to display was, let's look back at this. Try using DC sync with secretsdump.py and this user. So what does that mean? We're going to use secretsdump.py, part of Impacket, and we're going to use that new account that we created. And we are going to try to dump the ntds.dit file, which will allow us to get all the domain users' hashes. We have hashes of the whole domain, which we can go ahead, take offline, and attempt to crack. This is very bad, very powerful, and this is just yet another way that an attacker can get full control over your domain and your network. Okay, so like we just saw, we were able to successfully authenticate against LDAPs yet again with the user Paul K. Created that user, made them an enterprise admin, we verified that, and then we went ahead and dumped the ntds.dit file. Very bad, very impactful, and like I said, infinity gauntlet. All right, so let's talk a little defense here. First one being, consider disabling IPv6 across the network if it is not necessary. Let me speak on that a little bit, however. I would recommend testing this out before actually doing this. And monitor any network traffic or any issues that it might cause. In the research that I did, I've read that there can be unintended consequences. However, I don't know what those are because I have never disabled IPv6 across a large corporate network. However, it can be a good remediation, and I would consider testing it out first, or if you are going to roll that out, monitor your network for any issues it could cause. Next, require SMB signing on all hosts through GPO. There is a bullet that should be in here, but consider setting a DNS entry for WPAD to black hole that traffic. If WPAD is not in use internally, disable it via group policy and disable the WinHTTP auto proxy SVC. Enable both LDAP signing and LDAP channel binding. And then lastly, add administrative users to the protected users group to prevent their account from being used in an impersonation attack. More can be found in these links here. Both these two blogs have a lot of knowledge and wealth on Man in the Middle 6 and using that. And then there's a great video by the Cyber Mentor on domain admin via IPv6 takeover, which kind of shows everything and going back full circle again. So to conclude, IPv6 is being used more than many people might think. Organizations are starting to roll it out, and organizations are using it by default, and they don't know it. Most people are because of what Windows did. So additional attack surface may be available that you're not aware of, and this is applicable to both attackers and defenders. Man in the Middle 6 attacks with IPv6 are becoming increasingly more common. One of my buddies actually was just talking about how he got record domain admin for him in 20 minutes using Man in the Middle 6. So penetration testers and hackers are starting to use this tool, and it is becoming a quick and easy win for them. And lastly, do not fear the IPv6. It is happening. It is here. It is not scary. So become familiar with it. Again, set up a lab environment, get it configured, play around with it, learn how to use tools with IPv6, and enjoy it. It is very helpful for an attacker to know all this. Lastly, I have some references here. I will be posting these slides and all of these links on my website. I'll probably make a post on LinkedIn as well. But a lot of great references and resources that help me build out this talk. And additionally, I've posted some of these GitHubs for all the tools that you can go ahead and use. So With that, I'd like to thank CarolinaCon for allowing me to have this talk. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I look forward to playing in the CTF and listening to all the other talks after me. So thank you very much for tuning in. And again, looking forward to the rest of the conference.